Today on Straight Talk Africa, the 71st session of the UN General Assembly is underway in New York. World leaders are debating and searching for a solution to the plight of tens of millions of refugees. That's coming up next right here on Straight Talk Africa. Hello, welcome to Straight Talk Africa, live from the Voice of America studios here in Washington. It's Wednesday, September 21st. I am Shaka Ssali.
And hello to all our viewers and listeners on the continent and elsewhere. I'm Mariama Diallo, your social media reporter.
Today, the significance of the 71st session of the UN General Assembly.
Well, so much to cover during this hour. Coming up later in our STA inbox, we'll share your thoughts on our topic. That's through your emails, tweets, and Facebook comments. That's ahead on Straight Talk Africa. Hope you'll stay with us.
Global warming, peace, poverty, refugees, and the civil war in Syria are the top priorities of this year's session of the United Nations General Assembly. My colleague Paul Cisco has more.
Ladies and gentlemen, late next month, a child will be born, the 7 billionth citizen of our planet Earth.
And the UN Secretary General says the world's more than 65 million refugees fleeing political and economic oppression need more and urgent attention. He called on world leaders to approach the refugee crisis with creativity, compassion, and courage.
What can we do? How can we help these people find greater peace, prosperity, and justice in a world of crisis?
President Barack Obama hosted a high-level summit on the refugee crisis.
And together, now, we have to open our hearts and do more to help refugees who are desperate for a home. Because in the eyes of innocent men and women and children who, through no fault of their own, have had to flee everything that they know, everything that they love, we have to have the empathy to see ourselves. We have to imagine what it would be like for our family, for our children, if the unspeakable happened to us. And we should all understand that ultimately our world will be more secure if we are prepared to help those in need and the nations who are carrying the largest burden with respect to accommodating these refugees.
While it appears that global attention is more focused on refugee migration from Syria into Europe, 2/3 of Africa's displaced population, or 71% of Africa's 18.5 million displaced persons, hail from 5 countries: Sudan, South Sudan, Somalia, Nigeria, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Each nation is experiencing serious conflict. Except for Nigeria, 4 of the 5 are autocratically governed.
And today, as I speak to this meeting, Kenya is among the 10 countries in the world that is home to the largest population of refugees and displaced persons. In fact, Dadaab refugee complex is the single largest community of refugees anywhere in the world.
According to the United Nations, more than 600,000 refugees are sheltered at the massive Dadaab refugee camp in northeastern Kenya. According to Oxfam, the world's 6 richest countries, which make up half the global economy, host just under 9% of the world's refugees and asylum seekers. Other international issues of note. African leaders are joining other world leaders in calling for more urgent attention to global warming, to work towards eradicating poverty once and for all, and, as they have in the past, for reform of the UN Security Council.
It is imperative and urgent that the United Nations, and in particular the Security Council, should be reformed in order to ensure the representation of Africa. 1 billion people cannot continue to be denied a voice in this manner.
The Secretary General says the United Nations core mission is always peace. Finally, The Secretary General appealed to the body to do more for the battered people of Somalia.
Famine in Somalia continues to spread. I appeal to you, help save the children of the Horn of Africa.
U.S. President Barack Obama concluded his address to the world body with words of praise and reverence for the 71st General Assembly.
I can best serve my own people. I can best look after my own daughters by making sure that my actions seek what is right for all people and all children and your daughters and your sons. This is what I believe, that all of us can be co-workers with God. And our leadership and our governments and this United Nations should reflect this irreducible truth. Thank you very much.
Paul Sisko, VOA News, Washington.
Thanks, Paul, for that interesting report. And for that, of course, we have more on the latest developments in New York. And for that, I am joined by VOA United Nations correspondent, Margaret Bashir. Good afternoon, Margaret.
Hello, Shaka.
How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure, of course, having you on the show. Well, talk to us about some of the key issues so far.
Well, definitely, as Paul mentioned in the package, refugees and migration have been a key topic here at the UN General Assembly. A lot of attention focused the first 2 days on this issue. One of the things that Paul didn't mention, but I think is interesting, is that something like 80% of refugees are cared for in neighboring countries. And I think that really affects Africa quite a bit because you have so many crises on the continent and the refugees are pouring into neighboring countries. So that is a problem for many governments.
Very interesting. Let's talk about U.S. President Barack Obama, who, of course, just delivered his last address to the UN General Assembly. About 8 years ago, Margaret, he came to that same building, and the audience was ecstatic.
I was here then. It was a great day.
Yeah, he had a standing applause and all that kind of stuff. What happened to yesterday's speech?
Well, there was a lot of energy in 2009 and a lot of anticipation and excitement and expectations from President Obama. And, you know, he's come every year, and I think it's just the novelty of it maybe when a leader comes the first time, especially from the United States. But this year, it was his farewell speech. It was a bit subdued, a lot of reflection. But I think it also kind of brought it full circle back to 2009 because when he came here then, he wanted to reach out to the world again. He said he wanted to do multilateral diplomacy. He wanted a very proactive foreign policy through the United Nations, and he kind of did a little stock taking on that on Tuesday when he spoke to the General Assembly.
You know, Margaret, when you look at the president's record, he has accomplished a lot of important things, frankly, during the last 8 years. But why is there a perception that, for the most part, he has actually talked the talk without, in fact, walking that talk?
Well, I think he can't do everything himself, and the United States can't do everything themselves. And a lot of it involves political will from other countries. I mean, Syria, case in point, for 5.5 years, the Security Council has been divided and stalled over trying to stem this crisis and make it stop. And there's been no political will, so it's only gotten worse. So you can't just put that on one country. You know, everybody has to kind of work together.
Well, last question, final question, Margaret. What about the incumbent Secretary General Ban Ki-moon? He obviously delivered his last opening speech to the UNGA, and people thought that, in fact, he may very well have hit the ball out of the park.
Yeah, I have to say, in the last few months, the Secretary General has become much more vocal. He is releasing a lot of pent-up frustration and anger on member states. He spoke to leaders in Africa in his speech yesterday. He said the leaders in South Sudan specifically, he named them. He said that they have betrayed their people. He spoke about leaders hanging on to power, rewriting constitutions, manipulating elections. And he said that leaders are there to serve at the pleasure of their people. They shouldn't, manipulate democracy. They shouldn't pilfer resources. So he was very clear in his message, which I think we can see applied to several countries in Africa, especially DRC. This week, it's turned violent ahead of hopeful elections there.
Well, unfortunately, Margaret, time is not our best ally. On that note, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Shaka.
You're most welcome. And of course, here in our Washington studio, we have a distinguished guest, the Reverend Anyedi Okule, Executive Director, Africa Faith and Justice Network, and President Ernest Koroma of the Republic of Sierra Leone will be joining us momentarily from the VOA UN studio in New York. I have to say it's always a pleasure, of course, hosting you on Straight Talk Africa, Reverend Okule.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
How are you?
It's a pleasure to be. I'm fine. Still awake. I just returned from Dodoma, Tanzania, the night before. So
very interesting. You must have a bit of a sort of jet lag,
yes,
if you will. You heard, of course, the package. You watched the package. You listened to Margaret. Your reaction to the 71st session of the UNGA?
Yeah, the last thing in terms of having just come in from Africa, when she talked about the hitting points of Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, it really resonates with what we in our organization, the Africa Faith and Justice Network, have been crying over the last 4 years on the continent. The issue of transparency, respect for the rights of citizens, accountability to citizens, just governance, government realizing that they are employed by the people and therefore accountable to them. And so when you have issues like whether it be the situation in Ethiopia with the killings of people by security forces, or whether it be what is happening in Kinshasa, in the DRC, and across the continent, it makes one wonder what our leaders are actually there for. They are there to protect the people, but on the contrary, we see the reverse.
Well, of course, one of our leaders happens to be President Ernest Koroma of the Republic of Sierra Leone, and I guess, of course, he's joining us right now. Well, President Koroma, I have to say that I'm profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to have another opportunity to interact with you on Straight Talk Africa, sir.
Thank you.
You're most welcome, sir.
Mm-hmm.
What is the, what is your impression of the discussions and the dialogues at the UN so far?
Well, the discussions are progressing very well. It happened to be the last statement from the current Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, and also the American president was more or less making his farewell statement to us. And we have issues that are topical in Africa and out of Africa. And they more or less recall what has happened during their period in the UN, and gave out some thoughts as to what they expect the future should hold for the UN. And it has been quite interesting and topical.
We talked about the refugee situation, but I did not hear a lot about, for example, the plight of economic migrants from Africa, who sometimes lose their lives trying to cross the Mediterranean, going to Europe for allegedly the greener pastures. Any particular reason, Mr. President, why there has not been any special African Union session or summit on this most important issue, really?
Well, I believe that discussions on these all-important issues have been ongoing. And overall, we know that there are challenges that are facing African countries, economic challenges, development challenges, and other security challenges. This, coupled with the specific issues that are confronted in the individual countries,
have kind of resulted to this increased number of people migrating. But I think the migration issue is not just an African issue. It is a global issue. That is why the responsibility is in the rest of the world for us to meet, particularly nations of Africa and those that are directly affected by the people moving out, to address the issues. And a better way of addressing them is for us to look at the root causes of these issues, come back and provide the kind of support that is required for overall economic growth in the countries where these migrants are coming from. And we also have to look at improving the kind of opportunities in trade, in education, and which I believe are causing this whole movement of people who believe that there are greener pastures further afield than their homes.
How do you respond to some critics who say each year you meet in some of these important wild fallers, continental fallers, you talk the talk about some of these issues, you talk of course about the fundamental root causes, but at the end of the day, frankly, you do not implement what you agree to do?
Well, I will not say that there is no implementation of decisions taken. Looking back, a lot of progress has been made. I mean, even in Africa, you look at over the years, there have been progress in kind of economic development. There have been progress in democracy. There are still challenges, no doubt, but the challenges are so enormous that you don't expect a one-off answer or address to what we are experiencing. And I know that we are making some progress, although it may be a slow progress. But I think the important thing is for us to stay engaged, for us to continue discussing the issues, and work on trying to fast-track the improvement on the implementation of decisions that we have been addressing in moving forward.
You are the coordinator of the African Union Committee of 10, known as C10, whose mandate is to bring about the UN Security Council reforms. What's the latest update on that, Mr. President?
Well, we are a bit disappointed that we have not made as much progress as we have anticipated. But the African position remains the same. We are still committed to the Ezulwini Declaration and the Street Declaration as a canvassing position for Africa in the reform of the Security Council. We have made slight progress in a decade, but in our last meeting in Kigali, Africa reaffirmed their position. Africa has asked me to urge the world that they are still committed to the Ezulwini consensus, and that they will continue to stay engaged. They will continue to seek the redress to the injustice that has happened to Africa, and the discussion will continue until we have our request addressed.
What about the issue of Equatorial Guinea? I gather that you are on a committee, actually, alongside, of course, President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf and Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara. Any particular breakthroughs that you would like to share with us?
It's not actually Equatorial Guinea, it's Guinea-Bissau.
Guinea-Bissau, I'm sorry, Guinea-Bissau.
Yes. Guinea-Bissau has been a challenge within the ECOWAS sub-region for the past 4 decades. We have not had a government that have lasted for a term of 5 years without any difficulties. And for the situation that it is now, we visited on the mandate of ECOWAS, and we have agreed on a 6-point plan in trying to establish a dialogue of all the stakeholders and forming an inclusive government in which everybody will be involved, and trying to go into a constitutional review that will address the challenges that they now have against the next election in 2018. The good thing is that the Bissau Guineans are all excited about what has happened. They are all looking forward to a settled government, and I believe because of the commitment we have had from all the stakeholders, this is a great opportunity for Guinea-Bissau to move forward and usher in stability in the country. And this is an achievement for ECOWAS, and also an achievement for the UN that have given support, and the other nations that have also facilitated the discussions that we have just had. That is Portugal, Angola, America, the EU. We are all involved in it. It's not just an issue of ECOWAS. And it is our hope that this time round we will usher in peace and democracy in Guinea-Bissau.
You have been president of Sierra Leone for nearly 9 years. What have you learned about power during that period?
Well, power is an authority given to you by the people to try to improve their lives, develop the country, ensure that you attract as much investment as you could. And at the end of the day, I think the expectation of the people is for them to benefit from the authority that they have given to you. But there are always expectations and limitations in terms of accomplishing or meeting the expectations of the people because of certain constraints that you find yourself in. My own case, you have limited resources, limited capacity, and you have difficulties of consolidating a situation which you find yourself, particularly building the peace that we inherited. And most recently, we had the disruption that was caused by the Ebola that affected us, and the drop in the prices of the commodities that were our major exports. So these are challenges that do kind of limit the extent to which you would have loved to achieve in fulfilling the mandate that is provided you by your people.
Mr. President, there is a saying that a leader is as good as the people who surround him. There is a saying that it's not aptitude, but attitude that gains altitude. What type of criteria do you use to appoint senior members, for example, of your government?
Well, you don't have a standard criteria. It depends on the circumstances of the situation and your own assessment of the capacity of the person to deliver. That is, you use a blend of it. And of course, in our own circumstances, you want to achieve a national participation. Everybody should be feel involved in the governance process. You also have to ensure that the emerging issues of women empowerment, emerging issues of youth participation are taken into consideration in trying to put your team together. So that is why, looking at the team I always have, it's a reflection of, in the first place, a national character, and in everybody is every region, every district is seen participating in the governance. You have women as well as youths also participating in the governance.
Final question, Mr. President. Do you believe in term limits? And if you do, why?
Well, I strongly believe in the term limit if it is provided by your constitution, because at the end of the day, it is about the rule of law. And what is contained in the constitution is what you go by. For countries where there is no term limit, I think that is their choice. But for those of us that have term limits, we have to go by the constitution. And in any case, after spending 10 years of hard work, I think it is only proper that you give other people an opportunity to come and play their role in national governance.
Does this mean, Mr. President, that you do not intend, for example, to follow an example of some of your colleagues on the continent to bring about what some would characterize as a shifting of political constitutional goalposts in Freetown?
If there was any intention in that direction, we should have started the process before now. I mean, what we are focused on doing now is reviewing the Constitution, not along the terms of extending the terms limit, but this is a process that was started even before my term. We also want to ensure that the census process that we have started is completed. And for me, it is a question of a legacy. I want to ensure that I leave behind me a constitution that will address the challenges of the moment, a constitution that will make the governance more inclusive and more participatory, and a constitution that will stand the test of the time, not a constitution that will open up the term limits of a president.
What advice do you have for some of your colleagues on the continent who some people think they perhaps think that their political God is gift to their own countries?
Well, the issue of governance has to do with the rule of law. I mean, for me, what is contained in your laws is what leaders should respect. We should not toy with the Constitution or try to review them to fit our purposes. Constitutions are meant to serve nations and not individuals. But if there are no term limits in your Constitution, then that is it. You also go by the law of the land. But if there are term limits, we have to respect that.
Would you support, for example, an idea that if an individual changed a constitution to pretty much reflect his personal or political interests, that perhaps that type of person, in fact, should be shunned by the international community, just in the same way that when a general seizes power using AK-47, no one, in fact, is going to recognize him?
Well, the issue of determining the constitution of the country is sovereign, and that should be left in the hands of the countries. My position is that if there is no term limit in your country, and that is the law, but if there is a term limit, I don't believe that it should be changed because you want to continue in office. You have to respect the Constitution. And the world has become a global village. It's easy for the world to know that there are issues that are not in conformity with the general wish or the good of the people. And if that is the case, then I think for those people that are helpless, support must be provided to them. But I think the final analysis is that the law of the land should reign supreme.
You talk about the law of the land, but what about those, in fact, who use the law to undermine democracy?
Well, at the end of the day, there will always be a period of judgment or assessment of your performance. If you are voted by the people and they believe that you are not providing the service that is expected of you, they are the ultimate judges. And the period of elections, it is for them to decide.
Well, our thanks to President Ernest Koroma of Sierra Leone. I have to say, from the deepest, bitter part of the bottom of my Kabale heart and soul, it was a pleasure one more time to host you on Straight Talk Africa, sir.
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome, sir.
Yeah.
You are tuned into Straight Talk Africa, and we'll have more discussion in a moment. But first, here is Mariama Jallo. Take it away, Mariama.
Well, thanks, Shaka. Still to come, we'll reveal some of the fantastic feedback we've received from our audience through social media. Do stay with us as our conversation continues.
Today's youth are not just the next generation of African leaders, they are today's leaders. And this is the time to invest in them. Today, not tomorrow. So let's connect. Let's engage with each other on issues that will transform our societies. Innovation, leadership, entrepreneurship, things that you're doing to move the continent forward, to make you the greatest generation that Africa has known. It's Upfront every Wednesday, 17:30 UTC, right here on the Voice of America.
This is Straight Talk Africa on the Voice of America. Call us now with your questions and comments. The number is 202-619-3111 and the U.S. country code is 1. Call us direct and we'll call you right back. Remember to turn down the volume on your radio or television and keep your comments brief. Now back to Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you very much, Esther Gidi-Ewart, and welcome back to Straight Talk Africa, live from Washington. Once again, it's time to bring in my colleague and social media reporter, Mariama. Take it away again, Mariama.
Well, thanks, Shaka. As we've mentioned, the 71st United Nations General Assembly is underway in New York. This year, the meeting included a first-of-its-kind summit of heads of states and other leaders to address the large movement of refugees and the migrant crisis, with the aim of uniting leaders behind a more humane and coordinated approach. Well, this leads us to our question of the week, which asks, what would you like discussed about Africa at the 71st UNGA? Well, starting off the conversation is one of our viewers in Uganda with our letter of the week. Abiel Lawrence Malesh from Uganda writes, I would like to see the UNGA take decisive steps to stop the ongoing massacres and killings in South Sudan. The people of South Sudan are dying. There's no need for more discussion. The endless negotiations must stop and action must be taken by the Security Council to rescue the South Sudanese people. The situation is unbearable. Well, that was Abiel Lawrence in Uganda. And before we move on to more comments, let me just thank you for using all our social media platform to communicate to us. And another reminder that we are tweeting live today. Just use the hashtag #VOAAfricaUNGA. And if you haven't yet, do follow us on Twitter. Speaking of that, we'll go to a tweet. This time it's from Ortega, who writes that Africans should wake up to strengthen economic ties with Africa and beyond. We can defeat hunger if we invest in agriculture. Well, let's look at another tweet while we're at it, this time from Wugol, Manuel Wugol, who states that the serious item to discuss is to stop interfering on African affairs. The UNGA should stay away from Africa. Well, let's take a look at another tweet while we're at it. This time it's from Habat Nukula, who says that he'd like to hear how Africa can enjoy its resources like minerals and ways to do away with dictators who have ruled for ages. Well, now we'll turn to our Facebook, one of our Facebook followers, and go to a comment from Belden Masenke in Zambia, who writes that the UNGA should talk about the management of Africa's resources and how to make policies that will benefit Africa and not the developed countries. Well, great points made here by our audience. Your thoughts? Shaka.
Your reaction, Reverend Okule?
Well, let me pick up with the last comment about UN making policies that should benefit Africa and not the developed countries. You know, Africa is a very rich continent, and I dare say perhaps the richest continent on earth. Why? Minerals, minerals, minerals.
So why
fertile ground for agriculture and all of that.
If that is true, and it probably is, then how do you explain the fact that Africans are the poorest on this planet Earth?
That is at the core of the issue. There are several layers to it. One, Africans themselves, African leaders. Let me start with what President Koroma just said a while ago about the fact that the leaders are elected to serve the interests of the people, but they consider that often they don't do so, and that even when the leader is not performing well and the people try to get rid of him or her, they find other ways to stay in power. And he talked about the rule of law that is lacking. And so when you combine the lack of the rule of law and leaders who don't take into consideration the common good of the people, the interests of the people, then you have a situation where you have a few elites who are in collaboration with multinational corporations to suck off the wealth of Africa to enrich the West. It has happened for over a century, to the extent that Africa is reduced to a perpetual land for the extraction of raw materials. And so that's one set of issues. And we see the growing power of multinational corporations, even in sometimes driving the policies of the United Nations, such that the UN can craft a well-meaning policy, but yet there are fine prints that poke loopholes that you hear people say, is voluntary guidelines, for example. You know, you have this well-crafted policy to protect the poor, but yet you give those with power the power to voluntarily observe it. So it doesn't have the teeth to bite.
I hear you. Mariama, any more social media reaction, please?
Yes, absolutely. Let's move on to a comment from Richard Anfield from Ghana, who writes, I'd like the UNGA to discuss why the IMF and the World Bank should stop their hidden proliferation of Africa's resources. I strongly believe the kind of regulations and pacts they make Africa sign are only to the benefit of the West. Well, let's go to another comment, this time from Isman Moigua in Liberia, who writes, outside of Africa, the world seems to be under siege, with the world's superpowers locked in proxy wars amid bombings and sporadic killings. Meantime, millions of refugees are paying the innocent price for doing nothing wrong. I hope, above all, that peace will come to pass for the war-torn citizens in Syria, Libya, Yemen, South Sudan, Burundi, and Congo. Well, very interesting points made here. Once again, your thoughts.
So yours, Reverend Okule?
Yeah, in fact, that the second but last person just commenting kind of picked up in the point. The issue of refugees, the way, if you look at the refugee situation worldwide, refugees from Africa are not given the same attention as we see in regard to other refugees.
Like Haitians were never given the same attention to the United States.
Absolutely. So it makes you wonder when we talk about United Nations, we are caring for the interests of citizens around the globe, and yet you continue to see this inequality in addressing similar situations. So it makes you wonder, who are we really after? Whose interests are we protecting? So we need to, the United Nations is a wonderful body, but we need to re-examine how we do business. We talk about inequality in income between peoples, but there are policies that continue to promote inequality between nations, inequality between one group of people and another group of people. And when you do that and people perceive injustice going on, it becomes more and more difficult to have peace, to have stability, or to believe in the programs that we enact as a world body.
That is very interesting because during President Obama's address to the UNGA, among other things, he said, our identities do not have to be defined by putting someone down.
Good. Yeah, and we are seeing more and more of that. We are seeing more of that in terms of, we even what we commonly just throw around, developed and underdeveloped world, third world or whatever. Those kind of language, that kind of language, it's really creating a lot of stratification of people globally. And, it affects our minds and how we perceive things. It affects how we perceive people from certain regions, certain groups that we continuously put down, that we continuously degrade, that we try to raise ourselves above them. It creates a structure that doesn't allow us to coexist in a global world. We talk about globalization, we talk about interdependence of people, cultures, communities, the economic system, on the one hand, and yet on the other, you see this stratification going on in all layers: economic, social, political, regional, and racial. Let's name it.
I like that. It makes a lot of sense, but unfortunately, time is not our best ally. On that note, thanks, Mariama, for bringing us this week's audience reaction.
Well, that will do it for today's social media segment. Just a reminder that we appreciate all the feedback, whether it's in social media form or using other means to communicate to us. Please keep them coming. And if you are a new fan, just drop us a line at africatv@voanews.com. Once again, our email address is africatv@voanews.com, or post your comment on our Facebook page. Just enter the keywords Straight Talk Africa. Be sure to visit us online at voaafrica.com, or you can join our YouTube channel. Sign up to VOA TV to Africa, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Another reminder that the show is streaming live every Wednesday. Just go to the VOA Straight Talk Africa TV program page on our website, or simply watch us live on your mobile device. Just download the VOA mobile app. Well, now let's take a look at what's on tap for next week's program. Next week on Straight Talk Africa, a conversation with author Opio Oloya about his book, Black Hawks Rising, the story of AMISOM's successful war against Somali insurgency. That's next week, right here on Straight Talk Africa.
Welcome back, of course, and we are talking about the significance of the 71st session of the UN General Assembly. Our distinguished guest is the Reverend Nyedi Okule, Executive Director, Africa Faith and Justice Network, and of course, the Leonean President Ernest Koroma was with us for the first part of the show. Well, back we are here again. You, of course, were trying to make some sense, but unfortunately, time was not our best ally, so I had to interject, and I hope that you'll find some space in your beautiful Nigerian heart. Forgive me for that. Could you pick up from where you left, please?
No, yes. Let me return to your dialogue with President Koroma, which was very interesting. I mean, you asked him very poignant questions about presidential term limits, about rule of law, about African Union discussing this refugee situation. Yeah, there's blame to go around in what is happening. The responsibility of the community outside of Africa, but the African presidents themselves don't seem even to give much value to the lives of the people they are elected to protect.
Their own people.
Their own people.
But why should they actually pay attention to them when they do not go to State House based on the results of an election, frankly, that has been free, fair, credible, and transparent?
Well, you catch me with that. Why should they pay attention? But you think that even if somebody has stolen the election, and for a semblance of saying, I'm here for you, that he or she would address the needs of the people to the extent that at least some people can say, oh, he or she is doing something for us. But there are very few cases of that. I'm not blanketing all heads of state that way. For example, I'm very impressed about what the Tanzanian president is doing there. I just came back there. That's why I'm pointing there. And he's really looking out for the welfare of the people, you know. And sometimes we hear presidents talk about economic growth. Things are improving. But if you look at it closely, they are doing that at the back and pains and even blood of their people.
You find that sometimes, in fact, the statistics they quote are not reflected in their own people's stomachs.
Absolutely.
Not in their own people's neighborhoods.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, even sometimes, they're cooking up statistics,
Creative accounting.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, a reminder that you are tuned into Straight Talk Africa. If you wish to participate in our discussion, please call us at 202-619-3111. The US country code is 1. We'll continue our discussion in a moment. So please, don't go away.
I wanted to present music and a side of American culture that is most important to me, that is a part of who I am. They're going to get some incredible performances. That's one of the things I love, bringing these artists in so you can get to see them do what they do. It's soul music, and that's what music is. It's that which comes from the soul.
If you like today's show, please write and tell us what you think or give us some suggestions. Be sure to tell us what station you're tuned into. Our address, Straight Talk Africa, Voice of America, 330 Independence Avenue Southwest, Washington, D.C. 20237 USA. Or send us an email at africatv@voanews.com. Log on to our website at voaafrica.com. Or post your comments on Facebook. Keywords Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you very much, Esther Githu. And of course, this is Straight Talk Africa coming to you live from Washington. Now, Reverend Okule, last week in that chair where you are seated was Namibian President Hage Geingob.
Wow.
When he talked about democracy, he said he had a mathematical formula, which is accountability plus transparency equals trust.
Absolutely. Actually, is the tune that the organization I work for, the Africa Faith and Justice Network, we've been talking about the issue of just governance in Africa. We put conferences out in Uganda, in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Nigeria, in Ghana on this issue of just governance. And in fact, accountability and transparency. If I'm doing something and I'm very transparent and accountable to you, then there are no skeletons in my closet. You know, I'm not hiding things from you that even if you disagree with what I'm doing, you see the reason, you see why I'm doing it. And so you might disagree with me, but you are going to trust that I'm doing things the right way. And I like that because it is really a recipe for good governance. You know, you are accountable to the people. What you are doing is transparent. You know, that means there is fairness in the process. There is inclusiveness if I'm accountable to you, which means I'm including you in what I'm doing. I'm carrying you along.
But you can only be accountable to me if you know that I can affect your status. For example, that in fact, if we have an election, it is an election. Yes. It is not a selection.
Yes.
But in most African countries, you have presidents who control the judiciary system.
Yes.
Control the legislature, control the electoral commission, control the institutions of violence, law and order, whatever you want. So why should these people, in fact, be accountable to the ordinary people in their own countries? Because for the most part, these people are not citizens, really. They have absolutely no constitutional rights.
So in that case, I can't legitimately call them presidents.
Well, if you are a citizen, obviously they are not presidents, but in this particular case, you probably play the role of subject.
Well, yeah, subject being ruled by thugs.
Well,
you know, in some cases...
An individual authority, to be polite.
Well, you know, I'm reminded here, you know, that, you know, when, you know, a leader, a legitimate leader, has the mandate of the people. So if that person doesn't have the mandate of the people, at least the majority of the people, you know, 50 plus 1%, then that person is there as a dictator, not a person representing the interests of the people. And so that's why you see the scenario you just painted. When you have somebody gradually, meticulously controlling the judiciary, controlling the few elites around them, controlling the army, the security forces, to dance at their bidding. You can't call that the president of the people because he does not have the mandate of the people.
In fact, he almost virtually controls the oxygen that you need in order to be alive. Let's go to the lifeline of the show, which are the telephone callers. Good evening, Samuel from Uganda. You're most welcome, Straight Talk Africa.
Good evening, Ndugu Shaka and the Reverend. How are you?
Usually terrific.
Now, let's interact with the Reverend. How can the United Nations bring about hospitality to refugees that come from conflict areas? On the Syria problem, how can the U.S. and Russia come to a negotiable long-term settlement to bring about long-term ceasefire and peace so that the people of Syria can evidence peace? Thank you, Shaka. And what's your take, Reverend Okure?
Thank you very much. Let's go to Ghana and then I bring both to you. Good evening, Tafa from Ghana. You're most welcome to Straight Talk Africa.
Hello, good evening, Shaka.
Terrific. How are you today, Tafa?
I'm very good, Shaka. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
Thank you. I have a quick question to His Excellency. Your Excellency, I follow your campaign during
Tafa, excuse me, Tafa.
Yeah, I can hear you, Shaka.
I am afraid His Excellency.
Hello?
I'm afraid that His Excellency Sierra Leonean President Koroma has already left. He's not on the show with us, please.
Okay, but I hope he's listening. I hope so.
No, he's somewhere in a conference, please. He's somewhere in a meeting.
Okay, all right. So let me ask your guest. I've heard the African leaders were calling for the seat, permanent seat in the General Assembly. My question is that, I thought they would rather focus on good governance, accountability, and rule of law in the continent than going to the United Nations lobbying for seats, which is not relevant to ordinary Africans. What we need as a citizen of Africa, we need a good governance, we need accountability, we need the good schools, good roads, good hospitals. This is what we need. But they go there and try to lobby for seats You see, so we are appealing to them. They should come back home and do their homework very well. Prove to the citizens of Africa that they are really a leader. Okay? They were elected to save the people, not to themselves. So I'm ashamed to see them there trying to lobby for seats. They should come back home and come and do what people elected to do.
Thank you.
Hospital, we need them, we need schools, we need everything.
Thank
Before
you.
they go there and be talking about permanent seats. Thank you, Shaka.
Thank you very much, Tafa, all the way, of course, from Accra. He's talking about how people should be appealing. Why should you, as a citizen, appeal? You should demand, isn't it?
You should demand, because...
It is your right.
Yes, you are right. That's it. You know, one of the things that we found, the Africa Faith and Justice Network conducting empowerment workshops across the continent is the idea that many Africans don't get it, that their presidents, their leaders are people they employ. And so you don't go appealing to someone you are employing. You demand the person to do the right thing. So that mentality, we hope that it will catch on with time, that the population, citizens realize that leaders are leaders because of the people. The king is king thanks to the people.
Where is civic education when we need it?
Yeah, in fact, we are trying, the Africa Faith and Justice Network is trying to do just that. Village by village, city by city, town hall meetings, etc. But let me return to the refugee issue that was asked by the first person,
You have a minute.
Yeah, there is a saying in Africa, when two elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers.
Yes.
And so in this refugee situation that it was pointing out in Syria, you have two elephants fighting, but you have a middle elephant, Syria itself, and leadership that doesn't care for the people. And so when you combine that and you begin to describe the killings of people as collateral damage and use all fancy words to justify heinous crimes, then it becomes difficult to sort it out.
Well, let me ask you a question that I asked President Koroma again, which is about the plight of economic migrants from Africa. A lot of them die in the Mediterranean trying to cross. Correct?
Yeah.
And yet, the African
Tens
Union
of thousands
has never convened a special session to discuss this most important issue. On the other hand, it convened a special session to look at the International Criminal Court allegedly targeting Africans. And yet, frankly, when you look at the facts, most of the people that have been referred to The Hague have actually been referred there by African governments.
Exactly.
Some of those, in fact, are founding signatories, like Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni.
Yes.
Now, if you can actually do that, can you tell me what the concept of an African means? Does it actually simply, or is it simply applicable to a president, a head of state, but not when it applies to an ordinary African person?
You just sum it up in your last sentence. See, let me go back. The refugee situation.
Unfortunately, time is not our best ally. 10 seconds.
Yeah, refugee situation, the African leaders had not addressed it because they don't care. But, ICC is about them, so they are worried about it. You see, it's the same mismatch of the situation.
Well, on that note, thanks to our distinguished guest, Reverend Anyedi Okule, Executive Director, Africa Faith Justice Network, and of course, the Leone President, Ernest Koroma, who joined us earlier from VOA UN Studios in New York. Thanks to affiliate stations, along with our viewers and listeners, we thank you for tuning in. And for many, of course, I have to say, get better, not bitter. And remember to keep the African hope alive.